Hello, mate.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. How about yourself?
Chipper, top of the morning, another beautiful day, week's gone by, and life is good. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm pleased. It always inspires me when I see you so chipper and upbeat. It must be all of that sunshine that you get up there in that North Island.
If only it could go on forever.
If only it could.
Which leads me to my question. Would you want to live forever?
Do I have to live forever in my same circumstances?
Good point. That may be something I've written down. Explain.
Would I want to live forever in my same circumstances, such as working my butt off, being up late at night, sorting out stupid cats and dogs that are keeping me up all through the night, and painting and decorating cafes and things like that? Would I, if that was going to be my forever life, I don't know that I would. But would I like to live forever? If I could live forever and have the ability to just move around everywhere and see much and across a broad swathe of time, then there's a part of me that says, yes, I would. I would like to, because I'm really curious. Comes with a number of sort of little hooks for me, really. I'm really curious about the passage of time. I'm quite intrigued as to how things were hundreds of years ago, how we record them in our history and how we present them today and how we think about them today. So I'd actually quite like to be around in a couple of hundred years' time and to be sat in a pub with somebody telling me, if there are such things as pub, because they've probably all been banned because they're bad for the climate or something. But if they weren't banned, somebody would be telling me about, about the Falklands War in 1982. And I'd go, tell me about it. And then they tell me some cock and bull story about the Falklands War, because that's what history now tells us the Falklands War was. Or whatever it might have been from the era that I sort of have been born and living in, the 70s, the 80s, the 60s, whatever it was. They brought these things out in the 80s and they called them compact discs and they contained everything. And you go, did they? Is that how it was?
Yeah, that's how people think it was.
So I'd be really interested to see how mistakes of the past are then repeated in the future. I'd be really interested to see how that all worked. And also, one of the things about dying is not so much dying, the process of dying I don't much like the idea of. It's the hurt that it leaves others. So I would rather them not have to suffer that hurt. And so therefore, if I didn't die, they wouldn't suffer that hurt. I would suffer hurt by seeing them go, but that's okay, because I can cope with that.
Right.
But I wouldn't want them to have to suffer me going. I'm not sold on it. I just think it could be quite interesting.
I've got a list of for and against.
See, you all smart up there in that there North Island.
That's right. This is where you have to be smart to live up here, I tell you. Would I live forever? I don't know why I wrote this down. I don't think it's even related. But could you imagine living forever, never dying, and then committing a crime and you have to go to prison? They'd be wondering why you're not aging. It'd be very odd. I wouldn't want to live forever I possibly would, but there'd be one condition. I works with the elderly. Now you look, especially men, you look at an elderly man, their ears are massive because they never stop growing. If you lived forever, we'd look like elephants. There'd be massive ears flapping around. And the proboscis would probably just as weak. So for vanity, no, I wouldn't want to live forever. And also, as you mentioned, if you're not sound in body, if you don't like your body, if you've got body dysmorphia, or you have this disconnect, how tedious would it be to live forever? And you think every era you're going through is stuffed with morons. And also, I think it was Tolkien who really put it well with the elves. They're very melancholy. Because, as you say, they see people dying. You know, the gift of man in the Tolkien universe is to be allotted a certain amount of time. It's a bit like Genesis, isn't it? You know, you get 120 years possibly. So I wouldn't. We talked about the disconnect, and I should have had this book at the time. It completely slipped my mind until afterwards. I thought, I would love to have had a quote from this book, which I'm now holding up. It's called Woman at Point Zero by an Egyptian woman called Nawal el-Saadawi. Now, this was written in 1973, and the author was a psychologist, and she used to go into prisons and talk to women, and the story is based on an event, but she may have added to it, where a woman, the night before she was executed, she'd killed a man, told her story, and it led to this being written down. I'm just going to quote from it. I read about a ruler who had many servants as numerous as his army. Another ruler whose only interest in life were wine, women, and whipping his slaves. A third enjoyed wars, killing, and torturing men. Another ruler loved food, money, and hoarding riches without end. Another was possessed with such an admiration for himself and his greatness that for him no one else in the land ever existed. Also a ruler so obsessed with plots and conspiracies that he spent all his time distorting the facts of history and trying to fool his people. I discovered that all these rulers were men. What they had in common was an avaricious and distorted personality, a never-ending appetite for money, sex, and unlimited power. Men who sowed corruption on the earth and plundered their peoples. Men endowed with loud voices, a capacity for persuasion, for choosing sweet words and shooting poisoned arrows. Thus, the truth about them was revealed only after their deaths. And as a result, I discovered that history tended to repeat itself with a foolish obstinacy. Wouldn't you think that was written today?
Sounds very much like every politician I know of.
So my point being, that was written in 1970s. If you're living eternally, you're going to be coming across this year after year after year after, and how tedious would that be? I can see why there's a trope in these kind of things, that if you live forever, you end up living in somewhere obscure that no one can find you. You've had enough of people and the tide of life, and you just want to get off.
I can totally understand that. So as I say, there'd have to be a number of caveats that I stuck around my living forever. It would be at the peak of my physical prowess.
When was that?
Ever, one would ask, ever. And I'd have to be, as I say, very fit and capable. I wouldn't personally want to be aging at all. I would want to be stuck at the age that I decided that I would be stuck at. I would want the ability to be able to move and travel and not stay in the same place, because I think that's the way that you deal with it. You're right, nothing's changed though, so I think that it would be quite disappointing. Nothing has changed. What was going on hundreds of thousands of years ago is still going on today. What drives and motivates people still drives and motivates people today. It's exactly the same thing. It's only enhanced these days with a degree of technological expertise that the ancients didn't have in the same way that we have. I think they still had a lot of technological expertise that we don't appreciate, and I think that they were far wiser and far smarter than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
But I think that nothing has changed. Money, sex and power are the motivating factors of so much stuff. And then there's a general consensus that it's about what you can make for yourself and for your family, for your tribe. And I don't think that's really changed over the years. And it just goes round and the wheel goes round and that's that. So it would probably be quite dull after a time because you'd realise that nothing actually changes. But I'd be interested, like I say, to see how the mistakes are repeated year after year after year because people fail to understand what happened in the past.
I just want to go back to if you shut yourself off from the world. I did that for a couple of years. So that I'm probably over-fascinated by other occurrences where that happens. But mine was voluntarily, but there's also involuntarily. Have you ever heard of a lady called Leslie Van Houten? She was the youngest of the Manson family.
Oh, yeah.
She's just been released after 50 years.
She was involved in the killings, wasn't she?
That's right, she held someone down. She'd just been released, and the statement that was given in part reads this: she has to learn to use the internet. She has to learn how to buy things without cash. It's a very different world than when she went in. So if you lived forever and you got tired and you went off for a couple of centuries and came back, the big ticket items will remain the same, the venality of people, the pride, the ego. But the little stuff that all adds up to the way in which we operate, that would change, and that would be odd to come back and find, oh, it's all different. You're a fish out of water, and isn't that the basis of all these time travel movies, where people come forward into time, the world's so different, they're all discombobulated. How do I live, and so on. But I also think it would be in reverse. If you went back in time, you'd be discombobulated as well.
That would be the problem with taking yourself out of society. What I would be looking to try and do would be to go around to different cultures within society so that you watch things change, but in different cultures. So when Western Europe ease you off, you go into Asia somewhere, or you go into Africa, or you go into America. And of course, within my little world, I can do all of this because I'm allowed. I don't have to have visas. I don't have to have any of this stuff. I'm just able to move to these places.
Yeah.
So as I say, there's got to be some good fish hooks for me. If it was, here I am sat in this small town in New Zealand and my life is going to be a Groundhog Day, no thanks. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with my life. My life is fantastic and I love everything that I have and have built around me. But I really don't know that I'd want it to stay exactly the same as it is today, for example.
Yeah, that's a good point. That leads me on to my next point then, if that's okay. Now we've got the caveats out. I would love to live forever. I'll explain why. I got a quote. Time is too slow for those who wait, too swift for those who fear, too long for those who grieve, too short for those who rejoice, but for those who love, time is eternity. We live in our DNA. We live in our DNA.
Is that like Celine Dion?
DNA, which is our legacy. And they say dreams are the gate to eternity. I would want to spend life finding out what's beyond. I would want to look at the ideas of what's in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Guru Granth Sahib and in the Quran and in the Bible. And I'm an atheist, don't forget this, because there's an intelligence beyond ourselves. And that is something that you will never grasp however long you lived. So I would like to live just for that. I would probably shut myself up in an old monastery or a castle on a hill and collect the biggest library of esoteric stuff ever created. Because otherwise, what would eternity be for? Unless you'd want to improve the mind. The body, if it's never going to age, doesn't mean anything, does it? Nothing to work for.
A noble cause, and I can understand why you would want to do that. And let's face it, the pursuit of knowledge is an amazing pursuit because you never come to the end of it. Because if there is an infinite being, creative force, power, mind, you're never going to come to the end of that. Therefore, I would say, and sticking a bit of Christianese around it, I'd say that the pursuit of God is therefore the most compelling pursuit of life. And if that's a life for eternity, then that is the most compelling pursuit. And from a Christian perspective, I would also say it's actually all of this is a moot point, really, because in what I believe, I have eternal life. And that eternal life starts now. So the body may drop off like some slippery snake slithering out of its skin, but what's on the inside goes on in some shape, form. So, but it'd be interesting. I don't know about you, Mark, and you may never think like this because you're probably far more chipper than I am and not as dour and old detective-like, having seen all of the horrible crap of humanity for so many years in the same way. I'm not saying that you haven't seen any of it, but being a melancholy sort of man, I can probably sit in that melancholy sort of world like the elves and go, oh yeah, there you go, another one dead.
Well, it used to be very popular. If you lived in the 17th, 18th century, you were always living in melancholy and, oh, woe's me, and I feel so poor.
My wife always tells me that I'm one step above doom. You see, but I'm only dangling my feet in it. Don't worry about it. You know, I'm not in it.
That would be a criteria, of course, you'd want to maintain. You'd want to stop it when you'd had enough. If you had no ability to stop it and it just kept dragging on, that would be torture.
If you knew that you had no ability to stop it, that would be like purgatory.
Because you have worked with some interesting types. It also depends on your ethics. If you're going to live forever, the temptation to do bad would be unbearable for some people, wouldn't it?
For some people, I've got no doubt. This is why I feel that I have no superpower. Because if I had a superpower, I would probably use it for evil.
Right, okay. It's interesting.
The temptation would be so big, wouldn't it? You know, my wife was watching that program, I think it's on Amazon Prime, it's called The Power. And it's about these women who suddenly wake up and they've got this power in their fingertips. And basically it's like having a taser that they can zap people with and wreak havoc on men, particularly men.
Why is it always men?
Yeah, I know. It's because of all of this crap about patriarchy and all the rest of it. I'm probably not even allowed to say that, but who cares? I am allowed to say that. They have this power. My wife said to me, it's a really good program, but I should never ever have a power like that because there are so many people that I would zap. And I said, yeah, it's right. This is the problem, isn't it? With great power comes great responsibility, Spider-Man. Do you use it for good or do you use it for evil? Blah, blah, blah. And I think the temptation to just right a few wrongs, level the playing field, yeah, you don't want to do that. I think the best way to do it would be to be like some sort of mystic, a sage who moves across the globe, just offering wisdom and insight and encouragement, and then moves on. A bit like David Carradine did in Kung Fu.
Who was the guy in Highway?
Oh, he's the angel, wasn't he? I know who you mean. I can see his face.
They are supposed to exist. There is the story of the Wandering Jew, and I believe there is a group of angels. On our other channel, we did an episode on angels for Sacred Book. It's about the Bible, if you didn't know. It's said that there are angels in human form that are amongst us, and there still are, and they're eternal. So why are they here? It's to help humanity. It's to, well, whatever, because they're not fallen. They are supposed to exist, and a lot of religions and myth-based belief has these kind of people. Who knows? We may have come across them in our own lifetimes, but not known about it.
You never know, mate. You never know. I think, stick your little habit on and off you go. Pull your little cowl up and get your shepherd's hook and just become some old sage, some mystic who just moves around the world. We were talking about the other week, weren't we, about both of us feeling like we're probably nomads, always a bit of wanderlusts. I could go with that.
You want to keep your memory. That's what I would say. Because I can't remember stuff from 40 years ago.
How long you could remember stuff, or what capacity do you have to remember stuff? I think that our capacity to remember stuff is immense, and I don't think we use a fraction of it. I just don't think that we tap into the memory that we have. Even today, I speak for myself, I can't recite things very well. I can't remember things very well. I can't remember song lyrics well. I can't remember poems. I can't remember verses that I've read of books or the Bible or anything like that. I struggle to remember them. Well, it was only 2,000 years ago that 5-year-olds were able to recite the book of Leviticus from memory.
Yeah.
And 12-year-olds were able to recite the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, from memory. And I'm thinking, I struggle to remember verse 1 of Genesis, in the beginning, you know? So I think that our capacity for memory is vast, and I just don't think that we tap into it. But then again, I think that our capacity for much in our mind is vast, and we don't know how to tap into it.
Yeah, you're right. So would I want to live forever? If it's on your own, no. But if it will be someone that you love or get on with and you've got a connection with, yeah, that would be something. Certainly an adventure. But whether it would be something you could never get off, I'm not too sure. Because if you were living forever and the world destroyed itself, you're going to be hanging around in a bit of a wasteland. So, century, 2 centuries perhaps?
Yeah, but look, if the world went tits up and all turned to custard, and you were the only one of a slack handful of people that survive, you are numero uno big boss man, aren't you?
I'd be like Noah. I'd be getting drunk at the first opportunity.
Yeah, probably.
I think it's open to question. The idea appeals for various reasons, but in reality, I'm not too sure. And you said it right at the very beginning. You'd be seeing all your people that you love fall to the wayside. And how many dogs would you know in your life as a pet owner? It would be just unbelievable.
It'd be quite melancholy by the end of it all, I'm sure.
There you go, boy.
And another outstanding podcast.
Yes, one that just comes to a natural end, as always.
Wound up.
That's right. I've got nothing else to say.
Fancy living forever, you can't talk for 30 minutes.
That's 13, probably.
All right, mate.
All right, mate, take care.
Look after yourself. Ta-da, mate.
Bye.